Hey, everyone.
Hi.
Happy Wednesday. How's it going? Why don't we get going? So, let's open the meeting and we got an agenda. Has everyone had a chance to, take a look at the March 2nd meeting, minutes?
Yeah, I only have one note, which I think I'd be fine with if we could during the discussion under point 6, enrollment discussion,
Mhm.
if we could specifically note that Mrs. Potts is a community member, not a member of the. It was not an agenda item that she had asked us to put on the agenda. So we can specifically say that when she comments. I think that just makes it much more transparent. And you may want to do that going forward, but that's your business.
I think that's a great idea. Just generally speaking.
Yeah.
Candidly, nothing against that particular, but generally speaking, we'll try to leave all the comments outside of this group to last.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that usually makes it easier in my experience. So, okay. So thank you for that. Any other, comments, questions on the minutes? I think they're pretty standard for myself.
I'm actually not Ms. I'm Doctor.
Okay, so,
Sorry, I worked hard for that.
okay, great. Anything else?
Oh, actually, yes, there is a kind of grammatical error under 4. Again, it says, Ms. Riley said we walk to school with a lot of people and it comes down to what hits people's wallets. I think that that comment was we walked through the school with a lot of people during the initial project.
Yes.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes with those changes?
Oh, sure.
Great, thanks. Tim.
I'll second it. There you go.
All right, and we'll just go around the table.
Michelle Kirkby, yes.
Robert Ward, yes.
Carolyn Casey, yes.
Bob Meany, yes.
Teresa James, yes.
Bob Donahoe, yes. Bill Warner, yes.
Jessica Riley, yes.
Meredith Chamberlain, yes.
Tony Papantonis, yes. Matt Eldred, yes.
Mike Weber, yes. Thank you. Okay, we have the co-chair discussion. Thank you for the volunteer. I would love a co-chair. Dr. Chamberlain has just pulling the leg. Meredith has volunteered to help run the committee and just really I'm really excited for that. So
Can I make one
Yeah, of course.
suggestion before just that? We talked in the first meeting about whether to do co-chairs
Sure.
or vice chair or just a chair.
sure.
And then we didn't talk about it again, so we actually didn't vote to have co-chairs. So I was wondering if maybe we should just vote that that's the role we're wanting for us as co-chair.
Yeah, I have that note as well, but specifically, how are we defining this role, right? Is it a co-chair, vice chair?
Yeah.
Is it an equal split of responsibilities? Is it a
Yeah.
rotating month to month, like one person does 1 month? Just kind of like, how does the committee, what does everybody think that this should be and how should it operate?
I think it's a great discussion point. I wasn't anticipating a vote like now. I was just kind of bringing that up, but yeah. What do you think?
Well, I mean, chairs have extra responsibility in that they need to, set the agenda, facilitate the meetings, make sure everybody gets a fair chance to talk, help keep us on track on time. And so when you have co-chairs, you're both kind of doing that, working together as a team.
Mhm.
When you're a vice chair to a to a chair, then you're supporting the person who's chair. So the person who's chair has more responsibility and the vice chair sort of supports that person. And then, of course, when you're chair, you're doing it alone. So I mean, I don't have a preference one way. I just wanted to sort of,
You want clarity?
yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that anyone's questions about the different ways we could do it, or if you have another way, we just talked about it and made sure we agreed.
Okay, so how you described the co-chairs, I agree with, and the vice chair. So I like plainly, I think, I like the idea of having, a co-chair personally. If, this is just me speaking again, personality wise, like, I don't know, like, I don't really care about power. It's more in running the meetings, like, there's help there, but really setting the agenda, agreeing to, I miss stuff all the time, and not just me, but we all do, right? So like, taking notes and focusing on one thing while the conversation's going on. I think some of that would be very helpful. And honestly, as we really get into the process of, which will probably take some time, but really get into work, right? I think the division of work would be beneficial to have but I'm open to really anyone else's suggestions or comments. Don't know if people want to.
Well, I think it should be between you two, how you want to run it, really. Because you're gonna be working together, so,
Sure.
We did.
give you folks the latitude to decide how you want to do it. And I'm good with whatever you folks want.
You had other questions, maybe that'll facilitate some more discussion.
Sure. So if we're gonna do co-terms, my other question was, do we want to consider, sorry, if we're gonna do co-chairs?
Yep.
Do we want to consider kind of a term reevaluation period, right? So that we're not locking in individuals for the next 5 years, right? We have like an opportunity for either the individuals to say, maybe I need some time away from this, or if somebody else is getting more involved in one aspect of it, it makes sense for them to become chair. We already know, like, whatever the date is, we might be reevaluating this as a group instead of, I guess, getting in some sort of place where it seems like maybe we need an adjustment, or it seems like maybe somebody else should be in one of those seats. So that was my question, or wanted to see how the group felt about that. And I think personally, I like the idea of the co-chair, given the size of this group. I think, again, personally, I look at the role kind of with an internal and an external lens. So internal, who are the two individuals who can help drive the meeting, help us get a consensus, keep things running on track? Mike, I think you've been doing a really excellent job of all that. But then externally, I think we need to be understanding that even if this group right now isn't under a microscope, we will be. And the chairs will become the face of this group. And I think that's something we want to be mindful of. And even considering some of the things around the demographics of who comes to vote, right? So we had 1,700-ish people, I think, at the in-person town meeting, and then around, I'm going to say 400 to 500 people came to the ballot vote. I wasn't able to get the breakdown of demographic of who came to vote, so I would need to dig deeper to try to figure that out. But I think that's just something to keep in mind in regards to, like, who are the two individuals that could be the faces of the group, that when we take them and look at them as like a Venn diagram, can reach the most voters. Because while we're building a school for the community, we also need to be keeping in mind, I feel, who's going to come out and vote yes for this. And if we have to get to 2/3, I just think we really need to be cognizant of that.
So, thank you.
So if we set a year and then reevaluated it, and because you're right, we're at different points, right? We're just beginning, and then we'll get into it, and eventually we will be presenting, et cetera, and maybe be shifting chair roles depending on the year and what the focus is. Does that make sense when people look at it? I mean, and actually, if anyone doesn't want to be chair after 6 months, you should be able to say.
After 6 months, we could say, hey, can someone else take your
Fine.
place?
It might be a week-to-week decision.
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
Depending on how much grief I get in between,
Yeah.
sure.
There's also kind of a dual nature of this group as well, in that it's educational as well as building.
Yeah,
Right, so not only are we having to kind of show the public face of all demographics in the entire town, but we also have to be thinking about education and building all at the same time, and each are equal and integral. So
I think it's a good point.
there are a lot of really kind of, I think you're right, this is gonna be very different group with different needs over time.
Yes, good, yes, we go on.
I mean, a year is fine, and obviously I would say, generally speaking, that. Like, someone could, including myself, could candidly just ask off of it, and I don't know, I don't really plan to, or really, but generally speaking. I think that would be fair as well, like if it was too much, schedule's got to be too much, or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So, but I'm fine with the year, going back to, Michelle's comment in regard to like the face and like getting people to vote, right? I actually don't think that's a chair's role, I think that's all of our role, I think that's the town's role, but that's just.
I agree with you, but the chairs are gonna become the face of this project. That is, you can say one thing right now, but that's what's gonna happen.
No one's ever going to say all 14, 15
No,
names.
no one's gonna
right?
even
They're
know
say
if some of us are on
Mike
here.
Weber,
Yeah,
Or
I mean, there'll be someone speaking at town meetings and
Yes.
someone. I mean,
Sure.
it could be someone different going to the select board to update, but once we're really trying to talk to the community. We'll all need to be sort of spreading out and other chairs will be doing the bulk of it.
and I mean, I think in essence, the chair is the person who is permitted to speak.
Yeah.
for the
also
group.
true.
You
Yeah,
know, that becomes just a very.
Yeah, that is the
specific, you know,
responsibility of the chair.
Maybe
none of the
another
rest of
reason
you will
why-
be able to speak for
Yeah.
the group, and there will be times where, that chair will need to be able to kind of be extemporaneous if they have to, and take that responsibility, and that's also not always fun.
Fair.
It's also great. fun.
Okay, generally speaking, yeah, I mean, but I think the 1 year term is more than acceptable. Again, it could be less frequent. I think really what's gonna happen with us is that we'll have these meetings, through the end of this year. We'll really have to set a direction once we get back from MSBA. I think most of us agree with that, right? We can kind of get some groundwork. We can do some work in regards to public outreach. We can do some work into digging into the information that we have from the last go around. Which we'll talk about in a bit. But generally speaking, I think the real load is gonna come after we know MSBA's decision, and then what do we want to do? And I think that that's gonna be, and candidly, I'm much more suited to do the building part than the educational part. Like, that's just, I mean, it's just where my expertise lies, so.
Well, I would make a motion that we have co-chairs for our committee that have a term of 1 year.
Second.
Um.
all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Do we have to vote on the co-chairs? Or is this?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
have
that's
a
good.
co-chair.
Two parts of the-
Okay.
We do.
Okay.
And you could also say anyone abstain.
Oh, I would have, should I abstain?
No, you shouldn't.
Oh, would anyone like to abstain? I think I heard all eyes though. But,
Yeah, but in case you.
Thank you
just-
for this. This is why I need a
That's it.
co-chair. The more help you could give me, please. This is, yeah, no, this is the, I'm used to just ending meetings by saying, oh, that's wrong.
All right, so now I'll make a motion that we appoint Mike Weber as one of the chairs of the school building committee.
So moved.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, so then you,
Guys, all in favor again?
no, first you take all the nominations so that everybody knows who the possibilities are, and then you vote on each person. So you ask for any more nominations?
Any more nominations?
I'd like to nominate Dr. Chamberlain for co-chair.
Thank you, Bill.
Second.
Second by Mather. Thank you. Now I can say all in favor?
No, not to say any more
Any
nominations.
more nominations?
Now, that being said.
That being said, all in favor?
Aye.
All
You need
opposed?
to, no, you need to make sure we have, because it specifically says in the bylaw, we need 8 yeses for each chair, so you might want to vote on you guys separately.
All right, why don't
Or
we
can
just
see if
go
anyone
around?
does it. You need to have 8 yes, it says that
And
specifically.
you really probably should do each of you separately.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we go around the room then, and we'll do me first. And I'll just do the roll. here. Actually, why don't we just start with Michelle, we'll go around.
Okay, so this is from Mike Weber
You don't have
as
to, you don't have to
co-chair.
roll call for your own person. Right, because we're
Oh,
all
we
in
don't,
person.
so I've never
If you're-
not
if
done the
we're
roll
all in
call.
person, we don't have to roll call,
We do have to make sure we have 8
but we
yeses
have
for this
to
vote, though.
open with the roll call and close with roll call. In
Okay.
general, but general votes.
Thank you for this. This was not taught in my open meeting law lesson.
No.
Matter of fact, going back, I don't think we did some meetings in the last committee in person, but the reality, and then we did a bunch in person, but everything was online, so
Right.
everything was roll call 100% of the time. So that's really nice.
And to Michelle's point, if it specifically says 8, a number, I would recommend we roll call this one.
Yeah.
Even though we're
Yeah,
all present.
So let's start by the first suggestion of me being a co-chair and then second, so let's take a roll call on that. And we'll go around.
Okay,
And
yes, Michelle Kirkby, yes.
Robert Worth, yes.
Carolyn Casey, yes.
Bob Meany, yes.
Teresa James, yes.
Bob Donahoe, yes.
Bill Warner, yes.
Jessica Riley, yes.
Meredith Chamberlain, yes.
Tony Papantoni, yes.
Mather Eldred, yes.
I'll abstain. So we have, and so that's all yeses. I would like to take a roll call on Dr. Chamberlain being co-chair of the committee as well.
Michelle Kirkby, yes.
Robert Worth, yes.
Carolyn Casey, yes.
Bob Meany, yes.
Teresa James, yes.
Bob Donahoe, yes.
Bill Warner, yes.
Jessica Riley, yes.
I'll abstain.
Tony Papantoni, yes.
Mather Eldred, yes.
Mike Weber, yes. All right.
Congratulations.
Thanks. My wife's gonna kill me. All right. Let's move on. So I'd like to discuss again, because I think this is an important item. We had a good discussion last meeting in regards to the subcommittee. And I think this kind of ties into 4C a little bit, but if you're looking at the agenda items, but generally, I really think some of the work that we can do now, other than looking back at all the work that we did prior as far as site suitability and all that good stuff, is really the town engagement. I really think that's, I think we had a good discussion. I think there was some mixed feelings on it generally. I still personally feel strongly that we should, at a minimum, get some sort of a subcommittee together, start exploring even an outline of an RFP to an outside third-party firm to help us with community engagement. Because that, we talked about having funds, $250,000 that, we can spend. We talked about kind of the importance of getting the community involved as soon as possible and really, letting them have a real clear say on what the community wants. Which I actually think that this group really represents the community pretty well, but it doesn't mean that we're gonna be right if we agree on something. So, anyone have comments on this? Because what I really want to do is I'd like to, is there a certain number of subcommittees, people that, I know it can't be a quorum. Is it anything less than a quorum? 3 or 4?
Any subcommittee is responsible for minutes and posting their meetings.
I think he's asking size. of
I'm
the
asking
group,
size.
though.
But we
Okay.
can't, you just have to stay under the quorum.
As long as it's under the quorum, we're good.
Yeah.
And if the subcommittee's meeting, are they public meetings as well? Okay. So I just like to, again, I put it on the agenda because I think it's important. I think it's something that we can tangibly do now. Is really what I'm talking about it, because I'm not a big fan of meeting for meetings, quite frankly. Like, we all have busy lives and like otherwise. So if we can actually get started on some work, I think this is one of the things we can do. And I don't have it on the discussion item, but if anyone ever has items that they feel like, hey, we should be doing X as a group now, like, please email us, Meredith and I now, and like say, hey, can we get this on the agenda? Because I really think that that's important to, like, what could we do now? We have a limited amount of funds, but we have some, and we should be taking some sort of action to get this ball down the hill.
And there is a warrant article, right, for an additional 250.
So that was,
So that'd be the-
yeah, we could, again, that's why I said at 4C in the agenda items, that was part of that as well. So, first of all, any real, I got a volunteer, I believe, for the, yeah, maybe I didn't, maybe we just talked.
I
about it.
did.
Did you formally do that? Yes, thank you.
Formally said I would.
Um,
do that.
awesome. So let's talk about that committee and really what I'd like to accomplish with that is, I know we had a large discussion about it last time, but is there anybody have any more thoughts on this?
I got a question. So what kind of answers are we looking for from the community? Just
Mhm.
because I'm kind of lost on this one.
I was
When you say
thinking,
community engagement,
right,
what are we looking for?
I was thinking we could try to get some clarity on the community, and it would be a little bit of a numbers game, but to find out what the majority of people would like, right, in terms of Dale, right? You know, are they supportive of a new school? Was it the money, that was the no? Was it the location? Like, we have lots of different information about the possible reasons it failed, but I think we need a deeper dive and a very objective dive, right? Without any preconceived ideas, but just figuring out ways to find out why it didn't work. And then hopefully we'll get enough information to figure out a path that would work. So I see an outside person as helping us craft the right questions and then figure out the right avenues to get that information.
And also the baseline of the amount of people we would need to fill that out for us to be able to look at that as real data for us to be able to take forward and make decisions off of.
Right.
Not to mention that it is a good faith gesture to the community, saying we're already open.
Yeah,
We're already open for business and we're looking for what you need. It may not always jive with what comes out, but at least we know what your expectations are, so that if there's need to change for a specific reason, we can explain that, we can talk to you about that. But it is kind of a good faith gesture.
Right, and just start clean now before we have anything on the table. Seems a good way to go, to start.
Well, I think to dovetail that is what would have had to have been true for you to say yes?
Yeah, it's a good way to flip.
Maybe
the-
flip it just a little bit.
Does that answer any of your questions? Not really.
Not really. I kind of know, I mean, I understand it's, from a relationship standpoint.
Yeah.
It's probably not a bad idea. As a taxpayer, I just have I'm sure there were surveys done prior. And now we're gonna ask for more money to do more surveys.
Yeah,
It's just like, guys, don't we have this information? I mean, there's two sides, right?
yeah, no, I think you're right, in a way.
Do we know why it failed? That's the big question.
Well, I think there's probably
A number of reasons.
two or three key ones, right?
That's why,
Right.
isn't that what we just trying to,
But I think we
Make
know the
sure-
reasons, right? I think there were some people that just didn't want it at
Mm-hmm.
the location. The other was probably cost based.
cost is always
Yeah.
one of the reasons, yes.
Then there was these ancillary items about that are likely untrue about the water and things like that. But I think it really came down to people just didn't want a school at that location. They'd rather keep it at Dale. And the other was the cost. I mean,
But you don't know that any better than anyone
Uh,
else. You feel like it's true.
I talked to a lot of people.
But we
Yeah,
can, with data, we can quantify that range. Was the majority was cost 99%, and then only 5 people, or whatever, 5%, 10% was the location, or was it overwhelmingly location? I agree with you 100%. There's 3 or 4 reasons why it failed. But I don't know if we know, it's all kind of conjecture on.
And that's looking
How
backwards to
much
how
it
do we get
was.
to know, as opposed to looking forward to how do we get to yes. And I think that a professional, and I know that you and I would probably argue ourselves blue over this. I think that a professional, somebody who's truly a professional in this kind of data collection, could help us understand how to get to yes in a way that is clear. And I think the most important part is objective, not just a funny feeling that we all have.
Not even a funny feeling, but we kind of know, right? We all,
You kind of know,
We
yeah.
think,
so I
Well,
like,
you know, I
I
think,
think Anthony knows why he didn't, right? I think I know why I did, but we don't all know. None of us are psychic.
Mike,
go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
no, Meredith. Okay, I just want to, like, I think that that's a good start, but if we're talking about an RFP engagement with the consultants,
Mhm.
I'd like to understand a little bit beyond that start and what our expectation of that consultant would be beyond
Yes.
that. In the fact, in my personal expectation, or the way I would think about it is, to your point, it's that guiding, somebody that's got that external guiding communication light that can help our committee on that external phase and help us guide, go out and solicit other, to your point, we'll hit some points in this process where we need, yes, we'll need more community input besides that one. And we need to be kind of very proactive and on a good cadence to build trust in the community about that. And that's that communication piece. But that's a real strong, but that's not just a consultant.
Right.
That's
That's us.
us.
That's how we.
Exactly.
that's how-
And
yes.
so I'm, so,
So if that consultant helped us learn to work as a group, and people were like, oh, I know that group, it's the SBC, and I've heard them here, I've heard them there, and oh, they put this thing out, they do this. That helps us, right, go forward to a yes at the end, whatever that yes may be. So yeah, so they could help us, just not like, you're right, beyond the data, but also,
yeah,
How
I
do
think,
you
I think
function
that's
as a
more,
group?
I think actually that's much more important. Having someone kind of, almost like train us to communicate to the communities, to build that trust. Sending out, we can send out the questionnaire and
Doesn't work.
get the specifics, and I struggle as a taxpayer paying for it.
I think it's de minimis to the size of the actual project. If we don't get a specific data set and a specific set of objectivity, then you guys may very well be here 5 years from now.
I mean, what's nice about having the data and having public meetings is we get the data. It's visible to everybody.
I think the other
You know.
thing, yeah, I would want to know is why didn't people vote?
I mean, there's a whole.
I mean, like,
Some of
I
us-
know there are reasons, but
Yeah.
I think we've talked a lot about why people voted a certain way, but
Why, some of it's
Good
straight,
question.
some of it's straight
People didn't engage
logistics,
at
so
all.
didn't feel like going down, like something like,
Yeah.
how do we overcome that, is it? So,
I wonder the same thing. I think that the people who voted were only even a portion of the families in town, right? The families that have kids. I wonder why, more families didn't come out. I mean, that's
And
the
I
thing
think
that
we've
shocked
all
me
heard-
more than anything.
A lot of feedback about why that was so difficult, and it has a lot to do with the charter and everything else, but again, this is great information, right? This is great information. Maybe this actually benefits our town going forward and isn't specific to the SBC. What does help you engage? We were on track for getting maybe 200 votes for this election, this past election. We need to know why people aren't more engaged, why more people aren't running.
well, I
So
remember,
there's not such a bad, this is not such a bad data collection. This
Yeah.
could actually help us in the long run.
it just reminds me when we did the middle school and the high school. And I don't know if you know, but we did memorial, but the first thing we put forward was to build a K1 on the Wheeler property, to have 2 buildings, and it didn't pass, we lost. And so we went, back at a big town meeting, lots of people came, and then we ended up rehabbing memorial and flipping the middle school and the high school. And I'm up at the high school one day, and they just put all the hay bales down they do to protect the property. And there was a man walking with maybe a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and he goes by me and goes, oh, they having a horse show here today? And I said, no, it's having to do with the school building project. And of course, we'd spent years on this, right? I just chair that year. And he goes, oh, you're building a new school? And I'm like, do you live in Medfield? And he's like, yeah.
next door to the school.
How?
Close enough for what?
Kids who would come in Medfield School, no idea that we've just spent the last 3 years or so, maybe.
And,
You
and
know.
it's gotten perhaps worse and perhaps better because there is no paper of record.
Yeah,
Now,
not
there is
having the
no,
suburban
you know,
press has
like
been-
It does
the
hurt.
broad
It does hurt.
communication is delivered to your mailbox, but we
Yeah.
take the hometown weekly for granted that people read it and that it will be that free service. And yet, you know, everything else doesn't have that same level of kind of journalistic standard, be it, you know, Facebook or somebody tweeting or
Sure.
whatever comes from us. Right? So again, the objectivity and then having that guidance
Right,
to help us establish that kind of view that we will provide the best information we possibly can and having that happen.
So, yeah, I think this, the data that you brought up is like having numbers behind it. I like what you talked about, why didn't people vote? Like, and then the question is if you didn't maybe know, was it important, like things like that, we can probably gather with some help, right?
Yeah.
And then what you talked about in regards to teaching us how to engage, right? And whether that be just in a meeting format like this, right? Maybe there's more calls to, I don't know exactly, but
yeah,
we did, going back to the last, and I hate to look back, but the one thing I did learn in the last go around is when we did have, you know, we hired an OPM, we had an architect, we kind of let the architect, who in my opinion was very good, help, they led the charge with the community engagement. Really, the architect led it and the OPM kind of helped them guide that.
And it wasn't their
It's not
job.
their school, it's not their,
It's their architect,
Their
their OPM,
It's
you know.
not anybody's
So-
skill set here.
So we had meetings like this where we would have open houses and questions, and we met at Dale Street Cafeteria where we met last time. In the turnout, Stevie, you were there. I mean, they were very, very limited. I would say the maximum number we got at one point was 30, 40 people, and I'm sure that can be verified, but generally speaking, super low turnouts and things like that. But we really wanted to do a presentation about where we're heading. And it just, either we didn't do a good enough job getting it out there, which I think was on that committee, or candidly, people didn't care. So I think they cared in the end.
I
but-
think they care. I think maybe it's the people are just, people are just used to remote, you know?
Yeah, maybe you're right.
And
Yeah,
then that maybe plays into the town's strategic plan by the data that we're able to collect about how you engage people.
Go ahead.
Because I think there's
So
crossover.
just a couple of thoughts for consideration. I think, Carol, I'm happy to help. You want a partner in crime.
oh, a few.
Two, I think, as we go do this work, I know it's gonna be really easy, as we have these meetings in the future to talk about our budget and what we do. I think we need to be very specific with how we spend the money to make sure when we talk about big pools of money that are available, we be very specific in terms of what we think is worthwhile versus, having money at our disposal. So I think the words will matter as we kind of talk about stuff like that. I am a big fan of the outreach. I think we need to do it. I've made this point before. I think we have to come back. I think there are a couple of gating items that would be helpful to at least flush out, not to an exacting standard, but to, we sometimes refer to it as a t-shirt size. I think we need to come back to the work of what the warrant committee has done on costs and flush that out more fully. I think there's probably certain work that we should understand around the existing Dale Street School in terms of, if we wanted to reuse it, is it reusable? Because I think that'll inform how people think about site selection. So I think there are, and we can do both things parallel, right? We can go down the path of finding a help with the comms consultant while we do some of that other work. But I'd be really hesitant to put out any sort of kind of formal survey until we can level set on a couple of those facts. I think it becomes really important that people aren't making, people aren't sharing their opinion with us based on potentially faulty information.
Right.
And I just think I just think that there's gonna be a million things that we have to consider. And I think one of the biggest challenges will be not to, I kind of shared this last meeting. Like, because the answer wasn't A, doesn't necessarily mean it's B, because I think that throughout the process, for things that went one group's way, you never heard from like what their cons were and what their hangups were. And I think if we just assume that, well, because it failed, it must mean this option, whatever that option may be. Like, we have to understand the 360 of all of it. Again, I think that I come back to the fact that the costs on this are going to be astronomical relative to the last version. So we already have 2 strikes against us going into this thing, which means the margin of error is like this wide in terms of making sure how we kind of thread the needle to find something that's acceptable. So I just think like there's no, we can't make any assumptions in terms of, you know, what we assume people want. But that's why I think we start with the facts, and at least people have an informed decision in terms of where we go from there as a community.
So just to follow up on that, in regards to the subcommittee we're discussing, and you talk about existing conditions at Dale Street, and then the warrant committee's work to date on kind of costs. I think that can be kind of, that's just a fact, it is, they've already done the work. The Dale Street, I mean, are you talking about, so my gut tells me that the committee, those can be outside that committee, like those 2 items specifically.
Outside this committee or?
No,
outside?
outside the subcommittee.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. That's what,
Okay.
like, my
You're just
suggestion would
saying
be like
different data
future agenda
parallel.
articles, like, you know, like body work number 1. Work with the warrant committee to understand the work they've done on costs and understand if there's any other work we need to do. Understand that we don't know what the outcome is, but at least we can understand a frame of reference of where we sit today versus where we sat a couple of years ago. So for me, it would be point number 1 and probably the biggest point. You know, point number 2 is, and this may involve, you know, potentially, you know, leveraging work from last time, or potentially figuring out who can help us from a consultant perspective, evaluate, like, here and this is where I'll get outside my expertise. This is where, you know, the value, you know, all the builders' opinion on this, like who could work with to get a frame of reference on, you know, existing Dale Street. Like,
We have some good data, so at a minimum, I think maybe the next meeting, it's a great agenda item generally to say, hey, look, we can at least, Christine, we'll get in touch and we'll talk about it, but generally speaking, we'll get the data for, we have some dollars set aside for Dale Street projects in the upcoming couple of years. If Jeff was here, he could be more specific on this. Steven, do you know exactly what?
Yeah,
We
I
have-
don't know the exact number, but I know that there is money trying to be had for capital projects
Yeah.
that are over there.
I can send you it.
It might be silly, you know, satisfy it failed.
Yeah.
You know, some of that. money
Yeah,
is
Mike,
appropriate.
that's a good, generally speaking, we should talk specifically about that. I mean, I have a very strong opinion on whether the school can be salvaged or not.
that's what I think it would be like, you know, I started to go back and read through all the old reports and committee meetings and stuff like that, and I think there's value in, whether we do that individually, come back and talk about it as a group, or have a third party help, you know, facilitate those discussions and all the relevant current impacts. I think having that together, so again, to the extent that we can be aligned as a group in terms of, you know, what the starting basis is, I think
Right.
becomes really important.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, good. Yeah, I think you're right. But generally speaking, those are kind of parallel path items that we can
Yes,
run down, as well as, and again, I think we all have a little bit of a different. I think the subcommittee that I'm proposing to get to work really can be, we don't need to generate an RFP in a month, right? It's like, understand what this discussion we just had about, you know, getting data, understanding, you know, teaching us how to engage, maybe helping us engage, because I think we're gonna need to share that. We've used outside firms prior. I know the state hospital did. They used somebody that worked, depending on who you ask, well or not well. But regardless, you know, it's been done before. There are people who do this. So I think I think getting something back from the community prior to MSBA getting back to us is the important part. That's kind of like deadline that I'm thinking, right? Which is technically, I believe that's officially December or November when they get back to you.
Yeah.
Of the one in April. Did I read, we haven't heard about December, or did we get a no?
We got to know
We-
it's past December.
We
That
did
was
get a
last,
no.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that we have an agenda item just for in regards to the new statement of interest
Yeah.
that's due next week.
So Mike, what I hear you saying is, who would be interested to be on a subcommittee? That would be, that would evaluate and come back to this committee about other ideas and brainstorm.
Yeah.
On how that, what that could look like. I've heard a lot of great ideas. I'm happy to throw my name in and help with that.
Four.
And now you're walking for.
Better than one.
Yeah, right.
Do you think that would be a good size of an initial starting group and then add on as tasks become larger?
Yeah,
You know,
when we,
sometimes
maybe
if
when
you-
we know more, and we start getting more direction, we could ask for help for other things. That would make total sense. And meanwhile, there'll be other groups that are gonna be looking at other pieces, so we sort of divide and conquer. Everybody's got something.
And I think 4 is a great number. I also think that if you get to a point, you probably finish it within this group. Right? If you get to a point where then we have to divide out some tasks, then it can be, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's what we're here for, right? Like, I think everyone's willing to roll their sleeves up a little bit in here, which I think is why we're going to be successful in the end. And then, I mean it, like, this is a good group, so, yeah, I think once you get to a certain point, I think then we all kind of jump in and say, I could do this, I can do this, I can help here. I don't know that answer, but I'll work on finding it out, and, you know, that type of stuff, report out that way. Someone's gonna have to help me officially ask to form a subcommittee.
It's just in the motion.
Yeah, so-
You can
Yeah, you can
appoint,
appoint.
or you or
You-
Meredith can appoint, because you're
Depending on who
chair.
feels like being in today's
Meredith, you want to pass?
go.
I'm happy to do it if you don't, I don't want to put you in the spot, but
So I just appoint Caroline and Bob and Teresa and the subcommittee.
Or
Communications.
yeah, we'll call it communication subcommittee.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, put it
That
in
way
so that you get
you guys
something,
can-
yeah.
Figure out how you wanna.
If I was really creative, I'd rename that, because it sounds boring, but it's exactly what we're gonna be doing.
Sometimes boring is better.
Can't wait to do it.
Thank you
If it is.
very much. It's a good start, and again, I think, obviously, you know, Jess, have questions and stuff, just email or call, whatever, you know, however it may be. I really appreciate that, and I think we have a general basis of, honestly, you can go back and say, we don't need one, we don't need an outside consultant, we think we can do this, and here's why, boom, 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 or I don't know, like, right? I think, Christine is a really good resource to start with, to say, hey, what happened at the Medfield State Hospital, who did we use?
Teresa, you were on.
Yeah,
it,
you were
right?
on it.
She knows, she's got,
Yeah.
yeah, she's lived it, so.
Wonderful, you volunteered.
Seriously, thank you, all of you, appreciate that. All right,
And just so you know, the Medfield State Hospital was really a collaboration internally and externally. So
Yeah.
okay,
for that.
good stuff.
So,
It was so successful. I mean, when did we ever get such a yay vote? One no or two no's? Last town meeting, but
but to the point that everybody's making, that communication didn't start just 6 months before the town meeting.
Right.
It started at the beginning of that project and building a following and keeping that following going.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was feeding, I think you said it last time, just, you know, what's one little fact that we need to know, and that we need to get out there or educate. And then we use surveys to help educate in the way we phrased things too. Yeah. So, yeah.
all right, great. Next, we have some school committee updates. Michelle, you want to start with
Love to. So as you can see, Jess is here, so thank you, Jess, for coming to another meeting. As you may or may not know, there was an election this past Monday, so we had 2 new members that have been voted in. I was at town hall earlier today, though I don't think they've been sworn in yet. So what we decided at the last school committee meeting was that Jess would join us for tonight. Our next school committee meeting is April 13th. That's when we will have a discussion as a new team of 5 and decide who will be coming forward to join the SBC to fill Jess's seat at the April meeting that we have, which is end of
427.
there we go, 27. So that's kind of where we are right now and where we left off last time. 2 Fridays ago, the school committee held a workshop specifically to discuss the SBC around the Dale Street School grade configuration and kind of any other items that we felt would help the SBC. The recommendation that we came away with kind of at the end of the meeting was to create a packet that you all have in front of you. And the ask is that everybody reads through the packet between now and the next meeting. Any questions that you have, you send to me and CCing our 2 chairs. And then at our meeting in April, we'll discuss kind of questions that people had and the answers to them. But this will allow us to have kind of a common baseline on what we're looking at from an educational standpoint. So some of the things in the packet were the application for a new or renovated addition to the elementary school, the NESDEC enrollment numbers, which I believe we actually got new numbers yesterday.
We got them in our meeting.
No, Jeff sent us something like yesterday, or the day before. He said he would send them out to you guys, so we have additional numbers that just came in. The education plan.
Sorry, the one I'm looking at now is last year's. Oh, so it's staying here.
It's this fall.
Yeah,
Okay.
we get them every 6 months.
All right, so just pay attention to the date for these.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Can we post the new one on our website, the
Oh, like
new,
our email chain.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll just have
Yeah,
Jeff
just-
send it to you. I'll just have Jeff send it out,
Okay.
yeah. And then the education plan, which I think is like the bigger one at the end, but that one actually has a lot of really helpful information that was done for the last project. There's you can see the kind of typewritten document in there that actually was a grade configuration study that was done, or committee that was put together in 1979. And my understanding is that's when we took away neighborhood schools to get to the current configuration that we're at. So that one's a little bit more just like, oh, looking a little at history where we came from and how we got where we are now. The 5-year capital plan, maintenance costs for Dale Street School, population sheet, and an overarching timeline from the previous SBC. So again, I know there's a lot of things to read through in here, but again, the ask is everybody read through it, send any questions that you have, and we'll discuss it at the next meeting. And this will allow us to have a kind of common baseline around education.
And also, I mean, I think part of this also is that when you look at this packet, you see that there's no part of the educational elementary system in Medfield that does not immediately impact all of the other buildings. And that there's been kind of this historic kind of what we could call like 1 or 2 class waves that are so big. We have a class coming in post-pandemic 4 years from now. We are going to get hit with 2 or 3 class sizes larger than the year before. How do we, and those are historic, those have happened throughout time, and the 79, I've even read back to like 73, I think. They also have those, how do we as a system work together to make our school buildings more flexible and spend the money the best way we can to make sure everybody's getting an equal education across time.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that kind of also came out of our meeting was, right now we seem very focused, we as in the new SBC seem very focused on 4-5 when there's actually a challenge from K through 5. And is there a way right now that we can take a look at that and create possibly some flex space or something like that that can help us when we have these bubbles that come through that allow us not to be scrambling such that, the class is really giant. How are we fixing that right now?
So do you want questions on all of, just so I'm clear, like any of these documents? Okay,
Yep.
I didn't know if you just meant this.
Nope,
Okay, got it.
no, I feel like that one's really important, but I
Yeah.
think if you have questions on any of them,
Okay.
and that again, if you have a question, someone else probably has a question too, right? So.
But
that'll
what you're
help in that
speaking to,
space.
Michelle, is what the school committee had written to the Board of Selectmen on September 13th, that very first bullet, right?
Yes,
Okay.
right, that kind of kicked it off. And then the other part of this, Steve, sorry, I'm giving you and Jeff also have homework coming out of our workshop. We're gonna ask Steve and Jeff to also present at the next meeting and talk a little about the evolution of teaching and how, when we were all in school, back in the day, we sat at a desk, the teacher was up front, and then, maybe you had worksheets or something, but there wasn't a lot of movement in the classroom. And so specifically from an evolution standpoint, how space now impacts education. And again, the goal in that is not just to educate us, but it felt last time that lots of people didn't seem to understand how education had changed. So this will allow all of us to become ambassadors of how education is happening right now and why these things are important.
When you say this next meeting
April.
here, or your meeting? Your
No,
school
no,
committee?
yes, SBC meeting, yes.
All right, so you.
And then
And
any
you'll
other.
propose that to the chair.
To just, yeah, just send it,
Oh,
that's fine.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
So are
Robbie,
we
you
just
could do
gonna
that,
be
couldn't
giving,
Well, I was gonna say, and any other educators in the room.
To second that, everything looks different in schools. I mean, everything is, I'm in a newly renovated school, and if you walk through my school, you would
I
be
still want to do.
shocked. It's, my wife used to work for a company called WeWork, and it's like a communal working space. But she jokes that my school feels more like a WeWork than a school. Yeah, it just feels like that. Like, I remember the first time I went into one of those common working spaces. It was just different from anywhere I'd ever been before. A new school or a newly renovated school, it feels like that. It's really, there's still classrooms, there's still those designated spaces. But students just work in different ways. I mean, they all have access to technology now throughout the day. They're one-to-one, sometimes they're 1-to-2. In other words, like they have a designated device and then they might have a supplemental device like an iPad or something else that they're using, like a phone even in upper grades. It's just a very, very different landscape than it used to be. Students are able to work a lot more independently. Throughout the day, we work in workshop models in schools now, which is very different than direct instruction. Teacher talk is sometimes down to like 20-30% of the time. Whereas if you look back, teachers were talking 50, 60, 70% of the time in the classroom, 80% of the time when some of us went to school. It's now down 30, ideally the recommendation is 30%. Sometimes it's lower than that. That's not a lot of teacher talk. I mean, that's really like giving instructions, going into workshops, differentiating instruction throughout the day, giving kids exactly what they need. That requires the right space though. You can't do that in a room that's cramped. You can't do that in a room that doesn't have the right furniture. You can't do that in a room that you're not able to, break out different groups of students. People are also coming into the room. So in other words, like one teacher to 20, 25 students is not the norm anymore. You're typically having, one teacher, a curriculum specialist, a special educator, additional assistants. Sometimes we're looking at 4, 5 adults in a classroom at a time throughout the day. So it's just different. It's a lot more dynamic. And it mirrors the future of, workspaces. Really, there's a parallel
Frankly,
there.
mirrors the workspace that most of us work in now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's
I
true.
look
Even like
at
a
a
home workspace, if
traditional
you think
model.
about how you work at home and how that's different from you work in an office. You have the flexibility, you have the autonomy to get up, use the bathroom, go get a drink, go get a snack. That's how schools are moving. That's the direction they're moving. It's nice. I mean, it prepares kids for the future.
can I ask, so the next meeting when we put this on the agenda and we're asking these questions, is all of school committee coming to hear, or are they watching, or is it just the reps? Just
Yes,
so
so you're
I-
gonna email beforehand, right? So
Yeah.
you'll email me.
Yeah.
Because we don't have an extra person right now, and CC you guys, and then I'll make sure I have the answers for the next meeting. But no, I mean, I guess I could ask the school committee.
No, I just
They wanna
wasn't sure. I just
Okay.
didn't
But
know
I
what
think
they
it
were
was
thinking.
mostly like just Jeff and
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Steve coming in to.
Yes.
I'm interested in hearing them. Because it's very different from the schools that I went to.
Yeah.
I think safety also has to be a much bigger part of the discussion, not just because
Yeah.
it's Monday, but like, this isn't going away, so we have to start thinking about those large
Yes.
spaces, because they can't be, shouldn't be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a newly renovated school or a new school,
Yeah.
it's exceptionally safe in ways
Yeah.
that schools just aren't.
Mhm.
They're not as well equipped.
Did I see something from the school committee about conversations with the public?
I have that in my last talking point, yes.
Oh,
I can jump to that now, though. Yes, we, because it kicked off the strategic plan process. So this coming Monday at 6:30 in the Dale Street cafeteria, it's the community parent guardian focus group. So everyone here, I'd love to see you there, not just as community members, but I think it actually would be a good opportunity to listen to what other people have in regards to concerns around the schools right now. So the feedback that will come out of that focus group, there's also a survey that will be sent out to everybody mid-April-ish, and then published in places for people not in the schools to be able to access it and fill it out. But the information that'll be taken from these focus groups will allow the district to put together the strategic plan for the next 5 years. So an overarching framework that'll give us goals that we're working towards. And if you look at the previous strategic plan, Jess, you can add here, but I believe there was an entire section on facilities, and the Dale Street School was prominently listed in there. So again,
So clearly it will bring it here.
Are
It's
you, are
a
you
necessity.
filming it? Could we watch it later or do you have to be there?
that's a good question. I can find out the answer and let you
Yeah,
know.
I don't know. I do know that you can watch because Michelle and Anime and I, before Anime and I rolled up, we met with.
Yeah, I watched yours. Yeah.
And
that's up on
that's on Medfield TV, I think.
Yeah.
Now, and you can watch that before or after, if you don't want it to necessarily prejudice what it is that you might want to contribute. But that was about 2 hours, and I think we had a very long, comprehensive conversation
Yeah.
about some of our concerns around the district and some of the things we think are going very well.
So that's Monday, April 3, 6:30
Correct, Dale
Dale
Street
Street.
Cafeteria. Yep.
cafeteria.
So I'm sorry, Monday, the what day?
This
date?
coming Monday, so April 3rd,
Okay, thank you.
6:30, Dale Street Cafeteria.
Do you know if we've done outreach to people out, because it is open to community members? What outreach has been done for this strategic plan opportunity for like our seniors, for example, like, has there been any
It's being, there's
like
going to be one over
communication
the
to the
COA.
senior? Because the senior center has their own listserv, so I just,
Right.
I have my mom that lives in town, so I always think
Right.
about like, how does she learn about things, and then,
I know that they're doing a session at the COA. And they're kind of publicizing it through there, but they're, I think that they're hitting certain target groups.
Patch will be the other way, it'll be publicized on the patch as well.
How are the surveys conducted? Is it through mail?
The survey
mentioned
that's
a
coming in electronically,
It is.
yes.
Email list or?
Uh, The consulting group that does this, like, does the survey, so I'm not entirely sure technology wise what they're utilizing, but I would guess, given the amount of schools they've done this with, that they have a way to make sure that they're not encountering repeat IP addresses and things of that nature.
So
So
that's been a problem.
We're not hitting enough.
Place, but
Correct,
they're also,
yes.
like, obviously will, the school department will send out to the entire schools list, but once we get to community, the town does not necessarily have a full kind of email communication list for other households, so then it ends up being kind of a calling in, like, can you click on this link through the patch? Can you, however the town and
Right.
then.
We do have a
again,
list.
like,
It's
you do
through
have
our
a list now?
website. People sign up. We've had it for many years.
I mean, I've got the civic,
you can
yeah,
sign
that
up
same
for
thing,
the-
yeah,
I haven't signed up.
but not everybody in towns really
I'm saying.
know about it, do it, yeah, that's exactly true, like, it's a choice.
That's a part of the census data though, right? Isn't, are you?
I don't know if it's just on the census, but it's always in the town report. You can
Oh,
sign up for the QR code at town meeting. You can, it's on the
I
website.
thought email addresses were part of the census. No.
All right, I haven't.
I think she did this year, but we're not entering those into Civics Plus because we've been
Oh.
sending messages out. People who feel more comfortable, people sign up through the website and accept those messages from us.
And you have one more if you don't mind. Yeah, I know you said that was your last item, but
Oh, sorry, no,
You
yeah,
talked
my
about
next
the
one,
warrant
warrant article, yes. So on top of the 250K that was approved at last town meeting for the SBC, I know there was some confusion at the last meeting, but there is a warrant article at the upcoming town meeting for the SBC that's being sponsored by the school committee and the select board, and we can say that now. So we voted.
Moving into the 21st century.
School committee voted to sponsor that article, and I haven't checked to see, I'm guessing the select board will as well. But yeah, just so everybody here knows that that
They
is on
put
there.
it on the warrant, so I don't even think they don't need to.
Okay, then vote on it,
support
okay.
But they'll make a recommendation, but they were the ones who put it on there.
Did you say what the money was for, or you just?
The select board basically put it on there, they
Yeah.
asked us to co-sponsor it, and we're like,
Yeah.
that seems like a really good
Okay.
idea.
Carolyn, it mirrors exactly the language that was in there last year, including the amendment that was made on the town meeting floor.
Okay,
I saw I drafted it. I thought it was the actual last year. I thought
Yes.
it was last year's one.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that, it includes there was an amendment made on the town meeting floor, I believe, to the enrollment studies, that's also included in there, but it mirrors last year's.
okay, thank you.
I also recognize that our low income and English language learning families are a small portion of this community, but it is growing. And I also want to thank this group and other things that school committee does. That's not my per se, but just bringing about how we make sure they have voices, because in other districts that have larger low income populations, we have rented space in the meeting rooms in some of the developments because of one car households and childcare, just other things. And I just think about it, for going to the Council on Aging, I just think we have to, like, if I'm not an English speaking person, like, I'm not accessing any of this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if our minutes could also be, I don't know, I'm just thinking it's something to consider.
Yeah.
Because I know that group has reported not feeling very welcome in this community, so like, I would like to try to just think about how we do that.
Yeah.
But not everyone.
But from the warrant article standpoint, and a little bit back to what Bill was saying, if we are going to be asking the town for another $250,000, I think it's important that we start to understand how specifically we're going to be utilizing this and what the cost associated with some of these things are.
Yeah, and I think we probably, that's a good point, because we'll vote for, I mean, we'll know what MSBA says, like I said, November-ish, whatever, and the next town meeting is, the following May.
Right.
So my gut tells me that no matter what, we're gonna want to start hiring consultants and really getting, some sort of groundwork on whatever, a renovation, a new school, what, depending on what we hear in the next year. So that's why, but there's gonna be money required. And the last thing we want to do is be able to say, hey, we've got these great ideas. But we're out of money. We gotta wait till next May.
Yeah, but I think we're a little bit of a catch-22, because I don't think you can ask for more than 250,
Can't,
because,
for what?
yeah, exactly.
Right.
But reality could be that we get to December, hear back now, we want to get going. And we may be sitting on our hands for,
But we could ask for a special town meeting if we get a yes in. I mean, it's,
So it's fair too.
I mean, that's a favorite road, but
If you get a yes in, I mean. Christine, you could probably help more than I can on this, but generally speaking, was not looked favorable
not.
upon the
I know.
last time we talked about this, especially if you're gonna ask for like $1 million to hire an OPM and start
Right.
an architect and firm, hire an architect,
Yeah.
stuff like that, right?
I get
gotta
it.
be
It's
like
just that,
I don't disagree with your statement generally, but
it's so many years out and we've all been in Dale Street.
yeah, no,
I go as fast as we can.
I would love to move as fast as we can and candidly. Yeah, if I had it my way, we would have a special town meeting on a brand new school that, this group develops starting today. You know what I mean? Like, I think that would be great. Yeah.
So, question for the upcoming town meeting. Do we need to be prepped in case a ball or microphone is tossed our way? Hi, what are you gonna do with this money? And we don't want to have a deafening silence.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's
That's a
probably,
great question.
I think the answer to that is we should probably have that answer anyways. So,
Do you want to put that?
Because very often that happens, the
Yeah.
selectmen, the school committee will say, well, here's the SBC right here. They can answer that for you.
Exactly.
And you don't want to go, da.
You said I've done that to you before.
Gee, I don't know. If that's.
Do we have to have parameters to spell out how we spend it and like how we vote on it? I don't know. I'm asking that question.
You don't have to have exactly, but it does help to sort of say,
We need some,
we're generally doing this and these are the things that we're hoping to do with the money.
yeah, and we need so many members to say yes or whatever.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah, I mean,
short,
because
very
the-
sweet.
Amendment
Yeah.
lists a variety of things that can be done. But this is a variety of things. What is really
Right.
gonna be done?
We still
You know,
discussion.
where's our priority of needing money to advance XYZ?
Yeah.
And I think we're still a little young.
Okay.
We are.
To effectively answer that.
Mhm.
But the reality is if we get going, which I think we're all kind of eager to, and we start getting, a little bit of momentum. If we have to wait, from today, 16 more months to get any more dollars. And the handcuff, right?
So
And
do we need
interest
another
rates
sub-
continue.
subcommittee to form?
And the reality is like,
And I think you're just gonna be transparent. It's like,
yeah,
hey, listen, like, the one thing nobody disagrees with is that time is of the essence. And we need to get moving. And, so you kind of have to ask community to have a little bit of grace to say, hey, listen, you gotta trust that we're not gonna go waste your money. Because there's really no other option at this point. Otherwise, we're just gonna be unduly delayed. And, this committee was formed, by the article that was put forward with a cross section of people. We feel pretty good about it, but we don't know what we don't know at this point, so.
I think it's a great answer. Like, I think that's it. And I think, not knowing when the MSBA decision especially. Because the minute we know that decision, we can actually spend money. Like, that's the stuff that's worthwhile. Right? And maybe we don't want to right away because we don't have the responses from the circuit, maybe that, or town feedback, or responses, whatever, however that looks, right? But generally,
I think that you'll be working on parallel tracks at that point.
I hope so.
Anyway,
that's the goal.
so that's.
Should have thought of something
I was
that.
about to say, we're in the shop and-
Just pass a can each and every meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, you-
No, I was gonna close up that.
I just want to see
agenda
how
item.
many agenda items do we have for the next
Five?
meeting?
Oh, next item, yeah. Well, it's a good point. So I'm taking notes as we go. My notes are not gonna be as comprehensive as the meeting minutes that will be passed out. So I've got discussion on that warrant article specifically. Is that officially published yet?
The warrant article?
Yeah, the warrant article, is that published?
You kind of, it's on the website right now.
Okay.
The
I think-
warrant will be signed next Tuesday by the select.
I think,
Questions on this? Right?
the questions on that would be two. I think, the two items that Bill brought up in regards to, the costs of basically your purview.
Well, that was what I was gonna say. If that's one of the agenda items, I would like to propose another agenda item to have the chair of the warrant committee come give a presentation on the work he's done for the cost.
This is Steve.
Steve,
Yeah.
yeah, he's put together a pretty detailed kind of spreadsheet presentation, and I've spoken to him. He's willing to come speak to us in the next meeting and present that information.
So like I've listened to it. I think it'd be good to everybody here at the same time.
Yeah.
Make sure.
Cost.
It's just a breakdown of what on a per square foot with SBA funding versus non-funding, what the impact on a taxpayer would be.
Yeah.
And it's kind of grounding information.
Yeah.
And it kind of would level us and,
Mhm.
it really kind of makes sense of like, oh, this is what we're actually planning.
Yeah.
This is how it's gonna impact our town,
Right.
And he's done a good detailed analysis of it. It's like maybe 10 slides, but
Okay, yeah, I was gonna go next. I was on purpose with this particular meeting. I felt like the first meeting we had was too long. Only because we're not really like moving at all
Mhm.
yet, and we have a lot to say. We all just met each other, and but I sort of want to cut anybody off, right? Thought the last meeting was better, so I think and we can discuss this obviously, but generally speaking, like, that's a great idea, and let's do it. If we're all gonna have Jeff and Steve present too,
no, that's what I'm saying.
you know what I mean? Like,
So
we just need
it's-
to be cognizant of like, by 9 o'clock, if we're,
I leave it up to the chairs to decide
let's just talk about that.
what gets on the agenda, but I'd like to propose
Yeah.
that.
Can I also,
Yeah,
and it's your decision, but, yeah, I agree about keeping our meetings so that everybody's cognitively awake. And I feel that the warrant committee information is crucial right now for
Mhm.
us. That
Yeah,
we
yeah.
need to understand the money picture and have it in our heads. And I'm an educator, spent my whole life in education, so I'm all for talking about education. But I think we could put that one off.
Yeah.
And because if we're also talking about, if we get somewhere with the committee and some other things,
Thank
then, that's not gonna change, right? And that is, that's about education and how we're looking at it. But it's not gonna change, and maybe we could hold that one, like, because the money thing I think is crucial right now. And if we have to also talk about talking at town meeting
Mhm.
about money, we want
Which
to
is
spend
May
ample
1st.
time on that. Yeah,
So we have our meeting and it's like 5 days later.
Yeah,
yeah,
We'll be armed with
Right.
better information.
yeah. So I'm just prioritizing that. And I don't want Jeff to be sitting here waiting and then I mean, he doesn't need to sit here for 2 hours. He's got to
Well,
be
he
like,
does, I mean, he's on.
Yeah.
He's not here tonight because he had a conflict, but
yeah.
technically he does.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I agree. I think the educational part is very important. That's something I didn't truly grasp even the last time going around. Because it was done by others and that was fine. It was out of my purview. Like they got it better than I did. I would like to understand the description more though. So eventually we should do that.
Yes.
All right. That was, we could talk more about that as far as when we get there, but. Yeah, I think that's really important. And if, he's unavailable that night, just let us know.
I told him it was coming. I think he's gonna be.
There you go.
We just, okay.
We talked about
Are you driving?
Okay, the statement of interest, I'm sorry, we were set.
Oh, yeah, I'm good, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. All good stuff. I appreciate the school committee bringing that track for us. All right, the MSBA statement of interest submission is due in April. The school committee voted in favor of submitting on March 23rd.
Yeah.
And the Board of Selectmen we'll discuss that April 4th, but we've been told basically that they intend to vote yes, I believe. With what Gus kind of inferred, but again, we'll see how that goes. And I believe it's all set, ready to go. So I think that's an important item we're gonna get off our plate.
What's the actual deadline when that needs to go
I
in?
believe it's the 14th.
14th is what I was
The
saying,
14th,
yeah.
Okay,
Jeff and Mike have indicated it's pretty much done. Stevie, you have any insight on that?
On the statement of interest?
Yeah.
No, they work on that up there, and
Okay.
that usually goes to the school committee right over.
I happen to have a couple of questions on what I read on that SOI.
Okay.
Can I throw them out at you now?
I'm not gonna have answers, I bet you, but somebody might.
Okay, it was on page 4 of the SOI.
So I think this is the old one you're looking at too.
Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's from last year.
Didn't have a date. Well, it says 3/22/23 when I'm looking at.
Was it in our packet?
3/22/23.
So I don't see it in this packet.
Yeah.
But it was in the electronic packet. And I went
Why don't you
back
throw
and
them on
forth
anyways,
because
because I
it
think
was, it was kind of buried after the old one.
Yes.
Scroll all the way down.
Yes.
I mean, I wasn't sure,
And
I'm
I-
like, oh, is that date right? Or
3/20.
because it was after, yeah, I agree.
I don't think that's.
So it's not in our.
This was,
report,
it was
but go ahead.
electronically. It's just. I was curious why item number 1 wasn't checked off. And item number 1 is replacement or renovation of a building which is structurally unsound or otherwise in conditions seriously jeopardizing the health and safety of school children.
I think that that's
In my-
where buildings that
my-
are default down, literally.
There's other hazardous conditions, in my opinion, though. Not just structural. You're right, it does say structural, you're right.
Yeah.
But in overall sense, in my opinion, it could almost be checked, it could be checked off because of the asbestos, because of the lead, because of the HVAC system and the boilers. There's a lot of reasons why that could be checked off. I mean, you could debate this all night. But I just want folks to be aware that you might just want to take another look. If one is with an engineer, a licensed engineer, to see what they might think, someone that you might have dealt with, because in my opinion, it could be even and then item number 5, replacement renovations. Give me a second. Now, item number 4, prevention of severe overcrowding. Now, I know it's not overcrowded, but if you go by the student per square foot, I think it could be considered overcrowded. I'm not sure on that either, just something I wanted to throw out at you.
Thank you.
And then on page 5, did I have a question? I didn't write it down. Nope, I think that was it. Those are the 2 items. Thank you. So those are the two items I just thought you might just want to take another look at before it gets submitted.
And Bob, just to double check, so number one, not being checked off, whether the structural piece there, so just looking at that, and then number four, you could it be considered as overcrowded as part of that?
Per student, per square foot.
Yeah.
And with the roof and the modulars that leaks and you have to do the whole tarp thing, doesn't that fit into the structural
It does.
kind of piece too, in terms of?
It could.
Well, it says structurally unsound or otherwise in a condition seriously jeopardizing the health and
That's where,
safety of school children. So it's not just structural.
Right.
It could be.
Yeah, so,
I'm
but-
focused-
You know, mold, it could be asbestos.
Mold.
Right.
And mold is one of those.
It's pretty broad.
Yes.
I would definitely say that.
Twice.
I let them figure it out, you know, just check it.
Right, exactly.
If it's true and if it's gonna help, why not check it off?
Yeah.
That's all.
I'm just wondering if the reason they didn't check it is if you check those things off,
Yeah, and then,
well, then you really ought to abandon that building, shouldn't you?
Yeah, so there's a.
So I don't know if that-
Balance between like.
That's true too. It might limit you. it
Yeah, you
limit
might
the
say,
information,
okay,
know,
well, when are you
yeah,
putting up
so
the portable classrooms?
Yeah,
I think that's,
So, but I don't know if that's it, I'm just,
Accreditation.
I'm just taking a guess.
That's when you
Oh, yeah.
start to-
I understand.
Right,
that.
so that the state
Yeah, no,
actually
there's
comes
some
in and says this building
Yeah,
is
which you
highly
have to,
unsafe.
you know.
Nobody can be here.
Yeah.
So I think that that's, you know, because I know that we have probably in times looked, I think this is the third time, you know, that I looked at this and, we've all looked at it and said, well, that's a no-brainer. And, you know, obviously the MSBA came in, you know,
Okay.
5 years ago, whatever, and said, oh, yeah, this building is a mess. But it is still safe to occupy
Okay,
in the kind of balance of looking at other communities that have truly unsafe schools,
okay.
truly unsafe schools, you know, but we also do have things like, we have an agreement with the state around asbestos estate abatement, right? So, like, that's something we have to continue putting money
Monitor, right.
towards.
Right.
Okay.
So there's, you know, like, the state is very specific, and Mike, you can speak to this far better than I can, but they are very specific about what their rubric is around
Mhm.
that particular. kind of
No, I
designation.
understand. We don't want to
Yeah.
make it so that everybody has to get out tomorrow. You're right.
Right.
Understood.
But it's a good point.
I think it's a-
5 years from where we were last.
Point well taken. I think we should have maybe just Jeff weigh in on this, generally speaking. See if you can remember bring around.
Yeah, I'm checking with them.
Yeah, just have him shoot us a note, but I think the answer we'll get back is probably similar to what Jeff said, but I appreciate you reading the whole thing and getting through it. I didn't make it to that. All right, so anyways, that's where we're at with the statement of interest. By all accounts, this should be submitted, I hope next week or even this week if, the board of selectmen's meeting on Tuesday, so,
Yeah.
you know, hopefully by Wednesday, they sign it and can get it off. Because really, this is the make or break thing for us, and I think having, you guys talk next meeting will be super helpful to. Two options with MSBA, without, and Bill, you've been intricate in educating me, a lot, even more so than I knew before. And costs and really what this is gonna do to us as a town, but we all need it. We all know we need it.
I mean, you know, when it comes to like, yeah, as we think about the community engagement, right?
Yeah.
People understand MSBA is worth $300, $400, $500 per household per year. They may think differently about, oh, do we need to go alone or can we ride without them?
And
That's what this presentation does. It boils it down to that kind of decision making.
if we do it alone, you get a 50,000 square foot building as opposed to a 90,000 square foot building, whatever it may be, right? For the same money, right? There's a big differences. That was the end of our agenda. I really, the closing comments from the committee, first, before I take any public comments. I don't have any open questions, so if anybody in the public is watching wants to, somebody asked if easier to find the Zoom link. We can work on that. Thank you. That was Casey Worth asking that question. So Casey, I mean, if they're posted. Yeah. It's on the agenda.
Top of the agenda.
A couple people, since our last meeting, stop me and say, I'm having such trouble finding meetings. And it's not just us,
Well, if you
I was
get one
gonna
in like,
talk to
in
Christina.
email, like in like, business setting, it comes in the email link, it comes in the email body versus actually going into the attachments.
Exactly.
Copy in there,
Right.
yeah.
And I've noticed in other towns, like you open a page, like Westwood School Committee, and it has the agenda of the meeting, and there's a video, and you just click it, and so you can see what videos have been posted. You don't have to open the agendas, you don't have to scroll through Medfield TV and endless
So I mentioned
meetings.
we're starting a new website, it's launching the week after town meeting.
He did
Oh,
not.
really? I think, because it is sometimes hard to find the meeting you wanna get to quickly.
So, you were being serious on the new website, really?
Dead serious.
That's awesome.
It
Yeah, okay, fantastic.
was to fix some of these things and make it more user-friendly. We haven't had an update in about 5 years. So
Okay.
Westwood just did theirs about 18 months ago, so we're stealing some of that.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Same web designer, I hope.
Absolutely.
Okay, anybody else from the committee? Public?
Yeah, I just had a couple things. for
Sure.
thoughts, Senator Curve. I had mentioned this to school committee with regard to the money for the feasibility study for town meeting. That just, I know that MSBA had sort of sent up a red flag. With one of our people on the select board, just about not getting ahead of the process. If we do get in, just being careful about calling it feasibility study money, because they're gonna force us to vote in additional funds as part of the official process if we get in.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just explain to me someone from the MSBA and the select board part. What do you, I don't know.
So there was a this might have been shared actually at a select, one of the select board meetings. I know that Eileen Murphy had met with somebody from MSBA, and it was just as an introduction.
Sure.
Denise Garlic made an introduction. And there was feedback from that MSBA just sort of was like, be careful about getting too high, if you get in. Part of the process is voting in, the town has to vote in the feasibility study with a certain amount of money. And there was just, they say in their language too, not to get ahead of the process. So that's just something just to keep on the radar.
So Chris, are you saying like this amendment where it says that these funds could be used for a feasibility study would not apply then? You're saying then it has to be as
It would be additional money.
could be
If
additional.
we get in and we have to vote in additional money. for feasibility study.
So. Thank you, Chris. I believe could be $50,000 too. Could
Yeah,
be, I can tell you right now, the 250. That we have under our purview now, and hopefully the next time at town meeting, there's more. That is not enough money for a feasibility study.
Right.
So, but point taken,
I don't know
can
what the
still bank
threshold
it.
is,
It doesn't mean that we have to.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just reduce the deal.
but I just throw it out there just to.
I appreciate that.
Just so that was feedback. And then and I know that you guys aren't really too concerned about the SOI. But the only thing I would say too is that as part of the Medfield State Hospital due diligence that Trinity did and our peer reviewer did, there's documentation about the impact of the Trinity project as well as other 40B developments in town. And I just wondered whether the sentence on page 11 of the SOI kind of came across as a little bit of an overstatement with regard to this project, along with some recent 40B developments, have the potential to increase our enrollment significantly. So that kind of jumped out at me based on the actual factual information that we have from Trinity and the peer review. Saying that it'd be 100 and something students.
Spread out pre-K to 12.
Well, and I think that has to be a caveat in here, that yes, that's based on spreading out, but they did say that if you did get it in one grade or.
It's one grade.
It would be a big impact, but I think that needs to be, that sentence needs to be a little bit more specific.
Thank you. Just to play devil's advocate here. I don't know if it's overstepping personally, and again, I know you've researched this more than I, so I'm not even gonna argue that at all. I think as general as we can get on that. But the one thing we don't want to do is try to build it too big of a school, right? So is that, I hope where you're going with the general statement? Yeah, so I agree with that, if that's where you're going with it.
I mean, I think it's, I think as a writer, if I were gonna edit this, I would certainly say has the potential to increase enrollment significantly if they all come in 1 or 2 grades or 3 grades or whatever.
Or just,
So all elementary.
or will affect our enrollment.
Yeah, that's very general. Like, you're not, yeah. Yeah.
And then
You know,
also-
it will add to our enrollment, how about that?
The NESDEC projections for right now do not include anything that is happening at the hospital because that work has not actually technically been permitted yet. So those projections are not including that or the 11-acre first parcel that was just sold over on South Street. Or, you know, there are, and I think that I don't want our population to increase, but I also think the MSBA's process is detailed enough that if they were to be concerned about a modifier within a sentence, they dig down well enough to say that this is, you know, these are the real numbers, right? So I don't think that we would end up building a much bigger school based on that one sentence.
Can I just clarify, this is when we're talking about transparency, then when we're talking about building community trust. This is not just, my comment isn't just about MSBA, it's for anybody in the public that looks at that statement of interest. And who's been going to the state hospital meetings and says, I went to all these state hospital meetings, the state hospital project said, and we have peer review documents that say the impact's not going to be that great. And especially considering that we have a huge drop at the high school with enrollment. So.
Well, so one thing's not the other. This is regarding the adjustment, the development has nothing to do with the drop to high school, right? So I know they're related, but generally speaking, and it doesn't have anything to do with the 11 acres on South Street either. So I don't disagree with your statement by any means, nor am I trying to, I understand what your original statement. I also candidly feel, and we had this discussion prior, that we need to design a school that'll fit this town for 75 years. So I think the one last time might have been too big, but that's neither here nor there. So I think your point is well taken. Thank you. Anything else? Great. Let me see if I have any. We do have another comment here. Do I need to read out the names?
Yeah, name and address.
I don't have Kristen Simononi's address.
She's in a school committee.
He's on
Hey, Kristen, how are you?
Yeah, Main Street.
So 431 Main Street. Number 4. State hospital project isn't only 40B project in town, so we should broaden that discussion. So again, I think we broadened that discussion.
That number that I gave was for 40Bs and minimum students, so 100 projection and the review was combined.
So the peer review, I haven't not read or seen the peer review, so I'll
Duly noted.
yeah, I appreciate the comment, like I said. All right, so we have no other open questions, which is good. If we are all set here, I'd like to, anyone want to close the meeting? I'll take a motion to close.
Motion to adjourn. Oh, second.
So moved. Second,
Second.
I have a second. Do a roll call around.
Michelle Kirkby, yes.
Robert Worth, yes.
Carolyn Casey, yes.
Paul Meany, yes.
Tracy James, yes.
Well done, oh, yes.
The warning, yes.
Jessica Riley, yes.
Meredith Chamberlain, yeah.
Neither other, yes.
Michael Weber, yes. Thanks, everyone.